right, I hope you enjoyed the French Revolution video. And you might be thinking, why are we talking so much about France when our focus is British Romanticism? But as the video pointed out, all of Europe was concerned with the contagion of revolution spreading to their countries, England especially so. And the English government enacted many repressive laws trying to stop revolution from beginning in their country. But some English people celebrated the ideals of the French Revolution, especially our first author, William Blake, and our second author, Mary Wollstonecraft. So we are going to see a lot of focus on the French Revolution. But what I want to talk about today is I like to promote continuity in the sequence classes. So I like to start my sequence classes where the previous one left off. And British Romanticism was largely a reaction against the 18th century British authors. So we're going to think about what they were reacting against. Who were some of the Restoration and 18th century British authors that you read? Possibly you read Baines Orinoco or Addison and Steele's Spectator Papers, Gulliver's Travels, some poems by Alexander Pope. And we're going to think about the elements that typified the 18th century and how the Romantic authors rebelled against those. So I want you to take notes on this. Hopefully you've been taking notes all along, but if not, why don't you pause the video for a minute and get your notebook or whatever you need to take some notes. I will wait. Okay, you're back. So what I'd like you to do is divide your paper in half the long way, or if you're typing, maybe make two columns in your table, because one on the left is going to be for the 18th century and on the right for the Romantic period. So on the left side, what did they call the 18th century? The Age of Reason, the Enlightenment. So they were so concerned with sense and logic and rationality. But the Romantics were very interested in anything that you might think of as the opposite of reason. So sensibility, feelings, passion, instinct, and especially imagination. As we talked about, that is how the period got the name, the Romantic era. Now, the 18th century writers also were very interested in order. So following the rules, exercising a sense of decorum, following the rules of society. They had lots of rules to follow in their writing. They were very restrained. Think about their favorite poetic structure, the heroic couplets. How orderly are those? How restrained are those? Every line has to have 10 syllables, unstressed, stressed. Every poem has to rhyme A, B, B. They're very controlled. While the Romantic authors are more interested in freedom, and the French Revolution definitely helped inspire that. So they're experimenting with new forms of writing and new genres. And Blake is even going to invent a new printing method, illuminated printing, that we're going to talk about next time. So they're really exploring creative freedom. Now, the 18th century was very interested in hierarchy. So they believed in a hierarchy of artistic forms. The highest form of poetry is the epic. They wanted to write epics or mock epics like Alexander Pope did. They believed in a hierarchy of subject matter. So they frequently wrote about the upper class, aristocrats, Even Afrabane's Orinoco, which was about an enslaved person, was about an enslaved prince. And they believed in hierarchies of nature. So Pope's essay on man is all about the great chain of being and how all living things are in a hierarchical structure. And this certainly applies to people. So they were very interested in upholding hierarchies of class and of race and of gender. But the Romantic period is very egalitarian. So Songs of Innocence and Experience by Blake is not an epic. It's the opposite of an epic. It is lyric poetry. And the Romantic authors didn't just write about the upper class. In fact, two of Blake's poems are about chimney sweepers, poor working class children. And the period had several movements that challenged traditional hierarchy. So the French Revolution, the movement to abolish the slave trade, the movement for women's rights. So very different there. The 18th century also really believed in objective perception. So following John Locke's empiricism, they believe there's this truth out there and we perceive it through sensory perception and experimentation. But the Romantics believed in very subjective perception, that we all see things differently. And that is why the symbols of the 18th century and the Romantic period are the mirror and the lamp. So for the mirror, imagine an 18th century poet trying to capture nature, like holding up a mirror to a tree. Although I shouldn't say a tree, because the 18th century definition of nature was human nature. So maybe they're holding a mirror up to a political figure. Their writing was often so political. So they're really trying to exactly replicate this one truth. The Romantic symbol is the lamp. So picture a circle of Romantic poets around a tree, because their definition of nature was physical nature, kind of like what we think about for nature. They wrote so many poems about plants and animals and rivers and seasons. But they're all holding up a lamp, meaning a candle, around this tree, and each one is illuminating different parts of nature by virtue of their individual imagination. So no two people are going to see, the exact same tree. No one is going to see it in the exact same way. So we can call this differential perception, and it is a wonderful segue into William Blake, because that is what his work really focuses on. So the poems that we're going to read from him come from a collection called Songs of Innocence and Experience. So first, he published a collection of lyric poetry called Songs of Innocence in 1789. And then in 1794, he publishes the poems again, but now many of them have companion poems. And he said that the poems were showing the two contrary states of the human soul, innocence and experience. So what the companion poems do is they look at the same subject matter, but in different ways, using differential perception, one from a perception of innocence and one from a perception of experience. So I hope you enjoy reading those, and we will discuss them next time.